The House That Watches. I should have known something was wrong when Mr. Holloway offered me $3,000 for a week of house sitting. Cash, up front. That's not normal, even for the desperate-looking old man who'd placed the ad on the college bulletin board with shaking hands. But I was desperate too. Rent was overdue, my car needed new tires, and my part-time job at the campus library barely covered ramen and coffee. So when he pressed the envelope of bills into my palm and gave me the address, I didn't ask questions. I just nodded and promised I'd follow his instructions exactly. The house stood at the end of Berkshire Lane, where the paved road crumbled into gravel and the streetlights gave up trying. It was a Victorian thing, all steep gables and weathered gray siding, with windows that caught the afternoon sun like watchful eyes. The kind of place that belonged in a postcard titled Charming New England Architecture, but felt more like a warning. Mr. Holloway met me at the door on that first afternoon, looking even more haggard than he had at our meeting. His face was all sharp angles and pale skin, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Or eaten. He barely made eye contact as he handed me the key, an old brass thing, heavy and cold. "Everything you need to know is inside," he said, his voice a dry whisper. "On the kitchen table. Read it carefully. Follow every rule." "What happens if I don't?" I asked, trying for a joke, trying to lighten the mood. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his eyes were so hollow, I felt something cold crawl down my spine. "You'll find out," he said, "but you won't get to tell anyone about it." Then he brushed past me, climbed into a waiting taxi, and was gone before I could ask him what the hell that meant. The inside of the house smelled like old wood and lavender, with something underneath I couldn't quite place. Something musty and thick, like the air in a root cellar. The entryway opened into a long hallway lined with portraits, dozens of them, in ornate frames, all different people from different eras. Men in military uniforms, women in Victorian dresses, children with solemn expressions and eyes that seemed too large for their faces. I didn't look at them too closely. Not then. The kitchen was through an archway to the left, and that's where I found the note, written in spidery handwriting on yellowed paper. Rules for staying in my home. 1. Always close every curtain before sunset. The house doesn't like being seen. 2. Never look directly at the portraits in the hallway after dark. They notice. 3. If you hear footsteps upstairs, ignore them. No one lives above you. 4. The grandfather clock will chime 13 times at midnight. On the 13th, don't move. Don't breathe. 5. If the phone rings between 3 a.m. and 3:10 a.m., do not answer. It's not for you. 6. Never say the house's name out loud, even if you find it written somewhere. 7. Leave before dawn on the 7th day. No one has ever made it to 8. I read it 3 times, waiting for the punchline, waiting for this to make sense as some kind of elaborate prank or test. But there was nothing else, just those 7 rules, written in that careful, desperate hand. "Okay," I said to the empty kitchen. "Okay, this is fine. Just a weird old man with weird rules. I can do weird." I spent the first day exploring, getting my bearings. The house was larger than it looked from outside, with rooms that seemed to branch off in unexpected directions. The living room had a massive stone fireplace and furniture that looked like it hadn't been sat on in decades. The dining room table could seat 12, though only one place setting remained, gathering dust at the far end. And everywhere there were clocks, on mantels, on walls, standing in corners. None of them matched, and none of them showed the same time. It was like the house couldn't agree with itself about when it was, except for the grandfather clock in the hallway. That one stood silent, its pendulum still, its hands frozen at 11:58. I stood in front of it for a while that first afternoon, wondering why it was the only one not ticking. I'd find out at midnight. The first night was easy. I closed all the curtains at 5:47 p.m., just as the sun was starting to sink. I made myself dinner from the well-stocked pantry. Mr. Halloway had left enough food for a month, not a week. And I tried not to think about the portraits in the hallway. I kept my eyes forward when I passed them, heading up to the second-floor bedroom he'd prepared for me. The room was simple, but clean, with a 4-poster bed and a window that overlooked the backyard. I made sure to close those curtains too, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching the house from the tree line. I stayed awake until midnight, partly out of curiosity, partly out of fear. I heard the house settling around me, the usual creaks and groans of old wood. And then, at exactly midnight, the grandfather clock began to chime. 1, 2, 3. Each chime was deep and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards and up through my bones. I counted them, even though I knew how many there would be. 11, 12. Then a pause. A long, breathless pause that seemed to stretch and stretch. 13. On that final chime, the house went completely still. No creaking, no settling. Even the other clocks stopped their ticking. It was like the entire world had held its breath, and I remembered the rule. On the 13th, don't move, don't breathe. So I didn't. I sat frozen in that bed, my lungs burning, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I don't know how long I held it. 30 seconds, a minute, forever. And then, slowly, the house exhaled. The clocks resumed their ticking. The floorboards creaked. I gasped for air and lay back against the pillows, shaking. 1 night down, 6 to go. And the second day, I tried to convince myself it had been my imagination. The weird stillness, the feeling of being watched. I was just psyching myself out because of that creepy note. That's all. I spent the morning reading in the library, a dark-paneled room stuffed with leather-bound books that smelled like decay, and the afternoon trying to find Wi-Fi. There wasn't any. No cell service either. The landline in the kitchen worked, but when I picked it up, all I got was static and something that might have been breathing. I hung up quickly. That evening, as I was closing the curtains, I made a mistake. I was in the living room, reaching for the last window, when I glanced outside and saw someone standing at the edge of the property. Just standing there, facing the house. They were too far away for me to make out details, but I could see they were wearing something dark, and they weren't moving. Not at all. They just stood there, and even from that distance, I could feel them looking. I yanked the curtain closed so hard the rod nearly came down. My hands were shaking as I checked every other window, making sure every single curtain was drawn tight. And as I did, I could swear I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth. If you hear footsteps upstairs, ignore them. No one lives above you. I turned on the TV in the living room and cranked the volume up, trying to drown out the sound. But even over the noise of some ancient VHS recording of a cooking show, I could hear them, back and forth, back and forth. I didn't sleep well that night. The grandfather clock chimed 13 times at midnight, and I held my breath again, tears streaming down my face from the effort. When it was over, I pulled the covers over my head and tried to pretend I was somewhere else. Anywhere else. The third day broke gray and cold, with rain tapping against the windows like fingernails. I was exhausted, running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, and the house felt darker somehow, closer, like the walls had shifted inward during the night. I tried to leave. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I grabbed my bag, headed for the front door, and turned the key. It didn't budge. I tried the back door, the side door, every window on the first floor. None of them would open. They weren't locked. They just wouldn't move, like they'd been sealed shut. Like the house had decided I couldn't leave until my week was up. That's when I started to panic. Really panic. I paced the first floor, my breath coming in short gasps. And that's when I noticed the portraits. They were different. I couldn't say exactly how. The people in them wore the same clothes, stood in the same poses. But their expressions had changed. The solemn looks had become something else. Something knowing. Like they were aware of me in a way they hadn't been before. I forced myself to look away and spent the rest of the day in the kitchen, as far from that hallway as I could get. I didn't eat much. My stomach was twisted in knots. That night at 3:04 a.m., the phone rang. I was lying in bed, wide awake, watching the clock on the nightstand tick toward that window. 3 o'clock to 3:10. The rule said not to answer. The rule said it wasn't for me. But the ringing was so loud, so insistent. It echoed through the house like a scream, and I found myself sitting up, my feet touching the cold floor. The phone rang and rang. I made it halfway down the stairs before I stopped myself. My hand was reaching for the banister, my body moving on autopilot, drawn by something I couldn't name. If the phone rings between 3 a.m. and 3:10 a.m., do not answer. It's not for you. I backed up the stairs slowly, never taking my eyes off the phone in the kitchen. I could see it from where I stood, that old rotary thing on the wall, its ring cutting through the darkness. And then, at 3:11, it stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps in the hallway below, multiple footsteps, like a crowd of people shuffling past. I pressed myself against the wall at the top of the stairs and covered my mouth with both hands, terrified I might make a sound. The footsteps faded. I didn't go back to sleep. Day 4 was when I found the name. I was in the library again, trying to distract myself with books, when I pulled a volume from the shelf and a piece of paper fell out. It was old, older than the note Mr. Holloway had left, and written in a different hand, an older hand. Mornwood House, it said. Built 1847, cursed 1849. Below that was a list of names and dates, 17 names. The first was dated 1849, the last was dated just 3 months ago. Michael Brennan, age 24. Day 8. My blood went cold. I checked the dates again. They were all marked with day 8, every single one. No one has ever made it to 8. I looked at the portraits in my mind's eye, and suddenly I understood. Those faces, those solemn, watching faces, they weren't just paintings. They were the ones who had stayed. I spent the rest of the day searching the house for anything that might help me. Another way out. A phone that worked. Something. But there was nothing. Just more clocks and more rooms that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I'd walk through a door I was sure led to the dining room and end up in a pantry I'd never seen before. The house was playing with me. That night I closed the curtains early, before the sun was even close to setting. And as I did, I looked out the living room window one more time. The figure was back. Closer now. Close enough that I could see it wasn't wearing clothes at all. It was wearing something that looked like skin, but wrong, hanging loose, wet. I stumbled back from the window and ran to the kitchen, where I dry-heaved into the sink. The clock chimed 13 times at midnight. I held my breath. The footsteps paced upstairs. Day 5. I barely remember day 5. I stayed in the bedroom with a chair wedged under the door handle. I didn't eat. I could hear things moving in the house now, even during the day. Whispers in the walls, scratching behind the baseboards. When I passed the portraits to get water from the kitchen, I kept my eyes on the floor. But I could feel them watching. I could feel their attention like a physical weight. That night the phone rang at 3:02 a.m. I put a pillow over my head and counted to 600, my whole body rigid with terror. When the ringing stopped, I heard a voice in the hallway outside my room. Just a whisper, barely audible. Almost there. Day 6. Today. Right now. I'm writing this on paper I found in a desk drawer, because I need to get this down while I still can. While I'm still me. The portraits have definitely changed. When I finally had to leave the bedroom this morning, I made the mistake of glancing at them. They're all smiling now. Wide, too wide smiles that show too many teeth. And their eyes follow me as I pass. I can see them moving in my peripheral vision. The figure outside is at the window now. I can hear it tapping on the glass, even though the curtains are closed. A slow, patient tapping. The footsteps upstairs have been constant since dawn. They don't even bother being subtle anymore. It sounds like a whole crowd up there, walking back and forth, back and forth. I found more names today, scratched into the floorboards under the rug in the living room, carved into the back of the pantry door, written in the condensation on the bathroom mirror, even though I haven't showered in days. Michael Brennan, Sarah Chen, David Foster, Emma Rodriguez. On and on. 17 names. 18, counting me, if I don't make it out tomorrow. It's 11:57 p.m. now. Almost midnight, almost the 13th chime. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely write. The portraits aren't the only things that have changed. The house itself feels different. Smaller and larger at the same time. The hallways stretch on forever, but the rooms are closing in. I can't find the front door anymore. I've walked through the entryway 6 times, and it's just not there. The phone is ringing again. It's not 3 a.m., but it's ringing anyway, that shrill, insistent sound. And underneath it, I can hear singing. Multiple voices, off-key and discordant, singing something I don't recognize. The first chime of midnight echoes through the house. 1. I need to remember not to move, not to breathe. 2. But it's hard because something's scratching at my door now. Long, slow scratches, like fingernails on wood. 3. The house is saying something. I can hear it in the walls, in the floorboards, in the very air around me. It's whispering a name, not my name. 4. Its own name. 5. Mornwood. 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 6. And I almost said it. I almost let it slip out. But I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. 7. The portraits are in my room now. I don't know how, but they are. All of them, lined up against the walls, and the people in them are moving, stepping out of their frames with wet, squelching sounds. 8. They're reaching for me. 9. I can't hold my breath much longer. My lungs are burning. My vision is going dark at the edges. 10. Tomorrow is day 7. I have to leave before dawn. That's the rule. Leave before dawn and I'll be okay. 11. But I don't think I'm going to make it that long. 12. The 13th chime is coming. I can feel it building, like a wave about to break. And when it does, 13. The following was found written in a different hand below the main text in spidery letters that match the original rules. She made it to day 7. She joined the others in the hall at 3:08 a.m. after the phone call she couldn't resist answering. Her portrait is already hanging. Such a lovely smile. The house is ready for the next one. It's always ready.